All right, let's jump right into this. When you hear the name Ibn Khaldun, I bet you automatically picture a foundational philosopher, right? Like the absolute father of sociology and historiography, safely tucked away in some ivory tower dreaming up brilliant theories. But what's really fascinating about this explainer is that we're going to look at the man actually in the arena. This wasn't just a scholar sitting at a desk. This was a guy who went head-to-head with completely entrenched legal corruption in Egypt and literally had to negotiate for his own life with one of history's most terrifying warlords. So we're going to see exactly what happens when theory meets practice, and the stakes are, well, absolute life and death.
So, I want you to picture this. A besieged city, thick smoke filling the air, and an elderly intellectual trapped inside. And on the outside, the most fearsome conqueror of the 14th century, commanding a massive, totally ruthless army. How on earth does a scholar armed with literally nothing but historical knowledge and some sociological theories manage to sneak out of the city walls, look this warlord right in the eye, and not just survive, but walk away victorious? Well, to understand his ultimate trial, we first have to rewind a bit and look at the brutal battle he fought in the courtroom.
Trial 1. The Corrupt System. Mamluk Egypt's Broken Judiciary. Back in 1384, Ibn Khaldun arrived in Cairo and stepped right into a judicial system that was completely overrun by systemic fraud.
Right away, Sultan Barkuk appointed him as the Maliki chief Qadi, basically the head judge. And Khaldun quickly realized that at the very heart of the corruption he was dealing with was this specific concept called the waqf. Now think of a waqf kind of like a massive public trust fund. It's a religious endowment, property that's set aside purely for public benefit and charity. Under Islamic law, these properties were highly protected. You couldn't just casually buy, sell, or trade them on a whim. But because they generated so much wealth, powerful elites in Mamluk Egypt were constantly dreaming up schemes to steal these properties for their own personal gain.
Now, to pull off a heist like this, the elite needed people on the inside, which honestly brilliantly illustrates the gap between theory and practice. The Islamic ideal of the notary, they were known as the udul, or shuhud, was someone deeply pious, a guy with a spotless record whose entire job was to prevent fraud and guarantee justice. But the 14th century Mamluk reality? Oh, it was grim. The notaries were thoroughly, totally corrupt. They actively colluded with state officials, took heavy bribes, and sniffed out shady legal loopholes to illegally sell off those highly protected waqf properties.
Mamluk law was insanely complex, and these corrupt officials knew exactly how to play the game. It was basically a step-by-step playbook. Step 1. A powerful person pays a corrupt notary to just falsely testify that a waqf property is completely ruined, totally useless for public benefit. Step 2. Well, since Maliki law strictly forbids selling waqf property even if it is ruined, they just take this bogus testimony to a judge from an entirely different legal school, a Hanbali judge. See, their tradition actually did allow the sale of ruined endowments. And Step 3. The sale is rubber-stamped, the legal loophole snaps shut, and the elite walks away with a highly lucrative piece of real estate. It was, honestly, a perfectly designed machine of corruption.
Which brings us to the price of integrity, a judge under fire. Because when Khaldun takes office, he absolutely refuses to look the other way.
He immediately launches this fierce crackdown, meticulously digging into the records of the notaries. Whenever he found forgery or fraud, and he found a lot of it, he dished out severe, exemplary punishments. He exposed these guys in public and permanently barred them from holding office. But, as you can imagine, you don't just disrupt a lucrative corruption machine without making some extremely dangerous enemies. The backlash was immense. I mean, the suspended notaries outright rebelled. They enticed state officials, who were definitely in on the waqf thefts, to back them up. They launched a massive smear campaign, dragging Khaldun's honor through the mud, questioning his Maghribi origins, and complaining so loudly about his quote-unquote oppression that the noise finally reached Sultan Barkuk. And the pressure was so incredibly intense that by 1385, less than a year in, Ibn Khaldun was forced to step down.
So the crucial takeaway here is just how completely uncompromising the guy was. Actually, I absolutely love this number, 6. Throughout his entire career in Egypt, Ibn Khaldun's relentless, unbending stance against corruption caused him to be appointed and dismissed as chief Qadi 6 separate times. Seriously, he would get appointed, totally crack down on corruption, infuriate all the elites, get forced out, and then eventually, when the political wind shifted, they'd bring him right back. He literally refused to bend his principles to fit the corrupt reality of the Mamluks.
All right, moving on to Trial 2, the Conqueror at the Gates, Damascus 1401. This is where things get really intense.
So the Egyptian Sultan Faraj abruptly flees back to Cairo, leaving Ibn Khaldun trapped inside the besieged city of Damascus. And outside, Tamerlane's legendary, utterly destructive army is surrounding them.
The city gates are locked tight, and the local authorities absolutely refuse to let anyone out. So what does our renowned elderly scholar do? It is literally a scene straight out of an action movie. In the dead of night, Ibn Khaldun is physically lowered from the top of the Damascus city walls by a rope. He hangs on for dear life, touches the ground, and immediately marches right over to surrender himself to Tamerlane's guards, demanding an audience with the conqueror himself.
When he arrives at Tamerlane's camp, he walks into the warlord's tent, greets him, and respectfully kisses his hand. Now get this, Tamerlane is just casually reclining, eating with his men. And surprisingly, the feared conqueror offers Ibn Khaldun a bowl of rishta. It's like a local macaroni soup. Ibn Khaldun, totally reading the room, smartly accepts the bowl, drinks it, and praises it. It's such a brilliant, immediate icebreaker that favorably impresses Tamerlane right from the very start.
But, Khaldun knows he's going to need a lot more than soup to survive this. So at a later meeting, he brings some incredibly well-thought-out diplomatic gifts. We're talking an exceedingly beautiful Quran, a stunning prayer rug, a copy of the famous Burda poem, and 4 boxes of excellent Cairo sweetmeats. And in this amazing display of cultural awareness, he follows Mongol customs perfectly. Before offering the sweetmeats to Tamerlane, Khaldun tastes a little bit of them himself. This was actually an ancient tradition to prove the food wasn't poisoned, showing Tamerlane that this foreign scholar genuinely respected and understood his culture.
And this perfectly sets the stage for a meeting of minds. This is where theory meets practice.
Over the next 35 days, Ibn Khaldun completely captivates the warlord intellectually. He doesn't just cower and beg for his life, he uses his vast historical and sociological knowledge to engage him. He drops the ultimate flattery, telling the warlord, "I do not believe that there has appeared among men from Adam until this epoch a ruler like you." But here's the kicker. This isn't just basic, empty flattery. Ibn Khaldun tells Tamerlane, "Look, I'm not a man who speaks by conjecture. I am a scholar, and I will explain why you are the greatest." He's setting up this deeply intellectual sociological discussion to literally legitimize Tamerlane's immense bloody conquests.
And he does it by introducing Tamerlane to his most famous theory, asabeya. It's this concept of group loyalty and solidarity, the driving force that allows groups to rise up, claim sovereignty, and establish massive dynasties. So Ibn Khaldun is taking the exact theory he wrote about in his masterpiece, the Muqaddimah, and weaponizing it. He is literally using it as a diplomatic tool inside the tent of a warlord just to save his own life.
Talk about knowing your audience, right? He masterfully applies his historical theories to praise Tamerlane's Turkish lineage. He tells him that the Asabiya of the Turks is so unbelievably strong, so historically unmatched, that legendary figures like the Persian Khosrow or the Greek Caesar or even Alexander the Great can't even compare to them. Tamerlane, who is a man totally obsessed with history and his own legacy, is just absolutely enthralled by this scholarly validation of his power.
In fact, Tamerlane is so captivated by Khaldun's mind that he starts pressing him for detailed intelligence. Tamerlane wants to know everything about the Maghreb, North Africa. He asks for a comprehensive geographical survey, so Ibn Khaldun retreats to his quarters and, in just a few days, pumps out an entire 12-booklet treatise. He details the mountains, the rivers, the cities, the politics of North Africa, and hands it right over to be translated into Mongolian. It really highlights Tamerlane's intense curiosity and, well, probably his strategic military eye looking ever westward.
Okay, right in the middle of all this high-level, life-or-death diplomacy, there is this wild, kind of hilarious little anecdote. So Ibn Khaldun had a gray mule, which was the official riding animal of a chief Qadi. Tamerlane, who apparently really loved mules, essentially asks, "Hey, is that a good mule? Can I buy it from you?" Khaldun, who obviously knows you don't haggle with a world conqueror, says, "A man like me doesn't sell to a man like you. I offer it as a gift." So Tamerlane takes the mule. But remarkably, much later, after Khaldun has safely made it back to Cairo, an envoy arrives and actually pays him for the mule on Tamerlane's orders. No way, right? Anyway, let's move to the climax of this entire encounter, the diplomat's victory and amnesty for the defeated. Because Khaldun actually decides to leverage all this immense favor he's built up for a much greater cause. Even though Tamerlane offered him a cushy place in his own court, Khaldun missed his home and his books. So inside that tent, he politely suggests to Tamerlane that, a great ruler would surely need the skilled administrators, the Quran teachers, and the secretaries who are currently trapped in the city. And Tamerlane agrees. Khaldun secures a written aman, an official letter of security, saving all these officials from being taken captive or killed. And for himself, he earns a peaceful,
midnight to zero Imagine being a grieving scholar. You're a man who just lost his entire family.
Right, his wife, his 5 daughters.
Yeah, his wife, his daughters, and his entire life's work in this catastrophic Mediterranean shipwreck.
It is just unimaginable trauma.
Completely. And then you step into a foreign courtroom, literally thousands of miles from your home, to battle this entrenched systemic corruption, and you do it using bare-knuckle physical force.
Which is just wild for a scholar.
It really is. And if that isn't enough for one lifetime, imagine later finding yourself being lowered over the burning walls of a besieged city.
Oh yeah, just dangling from a rope.
Exactly. Dangling from a rope to sit face to face, negotiating for your very life with Tamerlane, who is, the most terrifying warlord of the 14th century.
It sounds entirely like fiction, right? Like the climax of some massive historical epic movie.
Yeah, totally.
But this is the actual documented life of one single man. He's navigating one of the most turbulent periods in human history.
Well, welcome to this deep dive. Today, our mission is to explore the extraordinary life of Ibn Khaldun. We're going to trace his journey from creating the very concept of sociology all the way to his rigorous and, frankly, sometimes brutal reforms as a chief judge in Egypt.
It is quite the pivot.
To do this, we've pulled together a really fascinating stack of sources for you. We've got biographies of Ibn Khaldun, historical analyses of the Maliki judicial system.
Which includes those really deep dives into statutory hudud punishments, right?
Yes, exactly. And texts on 11th century Andalusia. We're also looking at Islamic educational philosophy and the foundational letters from early Islamic caliphs that, shaped the very idea of justice in this era.
It's a massive stack of material. And what really stands out in these sources is how all these seemingly disparate threads, theology, law, sociology, and this intense personal trauma, they all weave together.
Yeah, they create a man who fundamentally changed how we view human history. And who actually lived his theories out in the messy real world.
Right. He didn't just stay in an ivory tower.
No, not at all. But we have to start with the man himself and the world that forged him. Because his early life was, well, it was anything but stable.
Oh, far from it. He was born in Tunis in 1332 into this prominent family of scholars and politicians.
Okay.
But his early life is defined by profound, almost apocalyptic disruption. When he was just a teenager, the Black Death swept through North Africa.
Wow, so right in the middle of his formative years.
Exactly. It was a devastating plague. It killed his parents, it killed his teachers, and absolutely decimated his entire community.
That's devastating.
Yeah. And from the wreckage of that plague, he survives, but he enters this highly volatile, nomadic political career. For years, he is just bouncing across the Maghreb and Andalusia.
So places like Fez, Granada, Tlemcen, Biskra.
Right, all over the place.
So he's running from court to court, serving different rulers, probably getting thrown in prison a few times.
Oh, definitely getting thrown in prison.
Yeah, leading diplomatic missions. He's surviving on his wits in this totally treacherous 14th century political landscape. But how does a guy who is constantly on the run suddenly stop and, invent sociology?
Well, he basically burns out.
Just totally hits a wall.
Yeah, in 1375, he is completely exhausted by the endless political machinations and the constant shifting alliances. So he secures permission to retire to this remote, fortified castle in western Algeria.
Khalid bin Salama, right?
Exactly. And he stays there for 4 years in deep, deep isolation.
Wow, 4 years just totally cut off.
Right. And it's in this dark, quiet environment that he writes his masterwork, the Muqaddimah, which translates to the introduction or the prolegomena.
In doing so, he basically invents Ilm al-Umran, right?
Yes. The science of culture, or what we would today just call sociology.
Because he wasn't just recording a list of kings and battles like a normal historian. He was looking for the actual underlying laws of human society.
Exactly. He wanted to know the mechanics of why things happen.
So let's break down his core theory. How exactly did he think a society rises and falls?
Well, he theorized that history isn't just a random series of events, but it's this cyclical rhythm. And it's driven by a concept he called asabiya.
Asabiya, which roughly translates to what, like social cohesion?
Yeah, social cohesion, group feeling, or tribal solidarity. He argued that human civilization moves in a strict cycle. So it starts with Badawa.
Badawa being the nomadic rural cultures.
Right. Think of people living in the deep desert or the harsh mountains. These cultures are tough, they're fierce, and they are bound by incredibly strong asabiya.
Well, because in an environment like that, you have to be, right? I mean, if you don't have absolute loyalty to your group in the deep desert, you die.
Precisely. The harsh environment absolutely requires total reliance on one another.
Yeah.
So because of this unbreakable group cohesion, these nomadic groups eventually gain the strengths to conquer cities.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they conquer the cities, they establish a dynasty, and that moves the society into the next phase. Hadara.
The Hadara, that's the sedentary, luxurious urban culture.
Exactly. But here is the mechanical genius of his theory. The very success of that conquest contains the seeds of its own destruction.
How so?
Well, as the new urban elite build walls to protect themselves, and they start indulging in luxury, they don't need to rely on each other for daily survival anymore.
Ah, so the asabiya just dissolves.
Right. It evaporates.
Okay, so to put this in modern terms for you listening, think of asabiya like the culture of a scrappy garage startup.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, like they're hungry, they're fiercely loyal to each other, they're working late nights, and they are incredibly innovative because their basic survival depends on it.
Yeah, if they don't work together, the company goes under.
Exactly. But once they conquer the market and become a multi-billion-dollar tech giant, that's the Hadara phase, the environment completely changes.
You get comfortable.
Right. They build massive headquarters, people start fighting over, corner offices and stock options instead of actually building good products.
Yeah, they lose their edge.
They lose their edge.
Yeah.
And that makes them completely ripe for disruption by the next hungry garage startup.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. Because Ibn Khaldun observed that as the urban elite get comfortable, they literally stop fighting their own battles.
Yeah.
They start hiring mercenaries for defense.
Oh, wow. Outsourcing their